Welcome to Ruby Thursday. I'm Melissa Wanish. This recording of the Ruby Roundtable meetup in New York City took place on Wednesday, May 11th. The topic was React.rb. This was an interactive development session led by Mitch VanDuyn. Thanks again to Mitch for traveling from Rochester, New York to lead the session. We walked through creating a to-do app using React.rb. It was really fascinating to see how you could use React.rb instead of ERB in your views. I was most surprised by the lack of a controller. Thanks again to our sponsors ThoughtWorks for hosting and providing food and drinks. Enjoy this recording of the Ruby Roundtable. So I'm just going to say hello. My name is Melissa Wanish, and I'm co-organizer of this Ruby Roundtable. We've been around since 2008. The founder, Matthew Jordan, couldn't be here tonight, but he says hi. And just a little bit about me. I'm also the founder of Ruby Thursday, and yes, I'm going to take this time to plug. You probably got an email from me if you're on the Ruby Roundtable list. I have a course that launched, and it's up through next Thursday. So if you're looking to go from beginner to more intermediate, that's the kind of course we use. So check it out, and if you have any questions, you can always talk to me afterwards. So thank you again so much for coming. I'm going to hand it over to Duncan, who's going to talk a little bit about our awesome sponsor. Let's give a big round of applause for Duncan! Woo!
So we just like to give a little speech to say thank you and do the normal recruiting stuff, and also let people know we're not a co-working space. I guess there seems to be a lot of confusion about that. We are a software consulting firm, who has been here before? Okay. We're a software consulting firm, about 3,500 people around the world, 35 offices, 9 countries. We do a lot of high-end stuff, so software as craft stuff. Somebody described it to me recently as the Italian leather shoe of software. So I'm not a technologist myself, so I just would take a look at that. When I'm involved in doing events here, we do about 20 to 30 events a month, including this, lots of meetups, but we also built a strong social justice component. So we have the Muslim Writers Collective meets here. You'll see today it's just kind of a blank wall with art on the walls for various causes. We believe that knowledge should be free, so we give away a lot of knowledge, and we do thought leadership. And then we do a lot of tech for good. So we do the Tech for Democracy now, and you're familiar with them. We're involved in Black Lives Matter, a lot of stuff in the Global South. We're always hiring, so if you're looking to get out of your current job or looking for a new job, I'll be around in the cafe, come find me. And you can just say hey, I heard you talking, and I'll just understand what that means. We can talk about where you're at and what some opportunities are. Other than that, thanks for coming, and enjoy the meetup.
I'll let Mitch talk more about himself, but here's Mitch. Yay.
All right. So, how's that mic working?
Perfect.
All right, good. Sounds really weird. I've never really done much with mics. All right, so I'm going to talk about a gem called React. It's currently called Reactive Ruby. The name will change to React.rb soon. And I just want to talk about why we got involved in this, and I hope to just turn you on to it because it's really been cool for us. We have our website, my company is being converted over. We're basically in alpha testing now. If we have time again, we can play with it a little bit. And it's just been wonderful. So, who am I? I'm Mitch VanDuyn. I'm the co-founder of cadprint.com LLC. It's a e-commerce print shop specializing in short-run, very high-quality print fulfillment. Everybody's heard of Vistaprint. We're sort of like a tiny Vistaprint that specializes in a much higher quality product, but similar idea. It's a highly automated, cloud-based order-to-ship process. We have it's an entirely Ruby shop, and all the way to the software that runs production floor machinery runs as Ruby in the browser, gets downloaded and runs machinery. So I do that because it keeps things easy. Just having one language makes recruitment easy, it makes development easy, and the one flaw that we had in all that was JavaScript. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to use this demo. Who has not seen that picture before? Right? It's dull. Everybody's seen it, but it actually works. You know, if anybody wants to come up afterwards and suggest here would be another nice demo project, I would love it. But so far, it's the best one I've found. Just kind of show off all the bits and pieces in a nice, simple way. So it's the classic to-do app. You're going to type in stuff in here. It's going to add a new to-do in the list. You're going to check things off. You're going to be completed. You can look at these 3 different scopes or filters and see all completed, active. Or you can hit the big red X and delete. So that's basically 7 requirements. All right. So you got 7 fairly simple, fairly easy to state requirements. If you think about what classically you would need to implement this, you got to have some HTML. You got to have CSS, you got to have JavaScript, you got to have some server-side language, in our case Ruby, and you're probably going to have some templating language to sort of interface between them. So it's a pretty big learning curve, and it's not a lot of fun. And if you think about it, and I'm a pilot, so I like flying analogies a lot. So if you were to find out that in a cockpit that the guys flying the airplane making a landing here at New York City had to speak 5 different languages, completely different languages, in order to land the plane and talk to air traffic control, you'd be kind of disturbed. You'd say, well, that's probably not the best way to do things. And that's kind of how I feel about the current situation. And this is what I wanted. I just wanted one language to rule them all. And I love Ruby. I was trained as a software guy probably before most of you were born. Actually, my first classes I used punch cards. You guys know what those are. And and then I was out and I did real-time software for a number of years. I've got 10 patents in. I know I'm all into no intellectual property, but I work for a big company and they were into the patent thing. So. But I was out of that for many years doing management. I was an engineering manager at a very large company, and I wanted to start my own business, so we started catprint.com. And then slowly I got, the business was running well, and I could just sort of play a little bit more with the software. So I got back into software. As it happened, the company that wrote our website had done it in Ruby, and so I started playing with Ruby, and I fell in love with it. I know many, many languages. Ruby is definitely one of the most beautiful, powerful languages out there. And if you read, Matz's statement about, why he did Ruby, his principles, a beautiful thing. So if I said if I'm going to have one language to rule them all, I would really like it to be Ruby. Okay, so here we're back to our to-do. And what we're going to do is implement the to-do in Ruby. So without further ado, we're going to jump in here. And I think, I was talking to Melissa, and I think we have plenty of time for questions. So if at any point you want to stop and jump in and ask questions, feel free. The tutorial is presented as basically a GitHub repo that has each section of the tutorial is a different branch. So you start with the master branch, read that, do what it says. If you're all done, you run a test spec, and if it passes, you read those instructions right. And then you can go to the next chapter. And if you ever get stuck, you can just check out the next branch, and it'll clean things up. So that's kind of how the tutorial works, and that's what we're going to go through, as opposed to me just showing stuff to you. And I'm going to skip the first chapter is really good if you've got an existing Rails app, because it'll walk you through installing. There's one gem you need to install called Reactive Rails Generator, and that gem will you run the install, and it'll basically add all the little bells and whistles and bits and config files and everything to move all the thing together. Very nice project. It was done by a French guy, Bouche Botet, who has been, he's done a lot of big presentations on very similar to this himself. So that's how you get the thing started, and that's what the first chapter is all about. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna check out, get down here, I'm gonna just check out chapter 1. Okay. Can't see what I'm like. What? Yeah, I can do whatever you guys tell me to do. Only I know how.
Larger type.
There. Is that better?
Maybe double that.
Is that better?
Still bigger.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on in the terminal is not going to be as interesting. Let's get focused on making the editor bigger. How's that?
Perfect.
So now I can read it too. So check out chapter 2. All right. So now we're in chapter 2. And we can basically, this is how the chapters work. I'll just show you this so you get the feel for it. If you bundle exec rspec spec slash chapter 2, chapter 1.rb. That'll just run through a quick check, make sure that we installed everything correctly. And so,
Oh, yeah. You install?
here's a bundle install. Wait. That looks like 10. So it'll just run through, and what is it winding up? So one of the pitches I want to make throughout this is this is sitting inside of your normal Rails stack. So you get all the stuff, you get, RSpec, Capybara, all that works. So you don't have to learn a different tool chain, use the same tool chain that you're already using. I mean, who's doing Capybara testing on UI and a little bit, right? RSpec. So you don't have to learn that stuff. So we did 3 tests. We basically checked to make sure that we have a to-do model and that all the different stuff got installed. So now we're on to chapter 2 of the tutorial. And so just check this out. And we'll just follow the instructions. And that should build chapter 3. So chapter 2, what it's going to be all about is we're going to take the simplest components on the to-do are these little links down at the bottom, right? The little footer links. And if you think about the requirements for those, it's pretty simple. They're going to display each of the filters, they're going to display the name of the filter, and it's going to be highlighted with a style called selected if that's the current filter that's displayed. So if you think about that's a little component there. So what is that going to look like? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to run this little generator, bundle exec Rails G, React.rb, and we're going to generate a component called footer link. Okay. And that'll grind along, and then we'll worry about Okay?
Keep going.
I just typed in the wrong place. So it generated our thing. Let's just close that. So here's our footer link right there, and you see where it put out. This doesn't want to go any bigger, but all your React components are going to be inside of the components directory, inside of the views directory. Pretty logical place for them. So they are views. They're basically going to be views, and instead of the view being written in ERB or Haml, the view is being written in Ruby. All right. So and they're very small, and React has this notion of components that are just small, very small objects. So when you run the generator, it gives you a skeleton component that looks like that. And it sort of gives you all the hints about the different parts of a component that you might need. We're just going to delete all that. And I'll make another point that every component must have a render method. That's the only thing it has to have. They're all classes that are inherited from React component base. So that's the simplest component you could have. And we could fire that up in the browser and we would see the word footer link displayed in a div. But that's not what we want to do. We want to have something like this. And instead of me trying to guess how to type this, I'm just going to paste in this stuff. Okay, and so we'll walk through what these things are. I'm going to remove these comments so it's easier to see them. So there's a nice simple, this is what React would call a stateless component. This component it doesn't remember anything. You're going to feed it two parameters. You're going to feed it the current filter. Okay, so that's the one that you want highlighted, and you're going to feed it the filter that this component is displaying. Does that make sense? So params are like parameters to the method, except that in React that method's going to get called again and again and again as the UI displays, and that's why they're not passed directly in here. So they're like passed as initializers into the class. But again, because they're going to get updated again and again, there's sort of a cross between parameters going to the initializer for the class and parameters going to a method, and that's why they have their own syntax. So here's our render method. It's going to generate an anchor tag. So every HTML tag has a corresponding method in the React component-based class that corresponds to the HTML tag name. So you get anchor, div, span. And then all of the attributes of the tag are just passed in as hash parameters. So we're going to give it a class. And we want the class to be equal to selected, right, if the filter param matches the current filter. So if I'm supposed to be displaying all and the current filter is all, then I'm going to have the class be selected. If my filter is all, but the current filter is active, then that's false, and I'm just going to have no class. That make sense? Everybody, right? And so the beauty of React is you see there's no event logic. There's nothing in here saying, well, when it changes, then I need to do this and that and update parts of the DOM. That's all done for you. React's going to take care of, as things change, it will know selectively which parts of the system needs to be rendered based on which variables are being used, right? So it's very clever and very efficient. Yeah.
Is this like ERB, or I've never seen like having a and then
Well, no, because these are all methods that are given to you by that class.
okay.
So if you look inside of if you look inside of the gem,
Yeah.
and you'll see inside there's a method. Well, there's sort of one method, and it just looks at the name of the method and generates the right tag. Yep, makes sense. So it replaces ERB. Yeah.
I did change topic stuff. Is there any way to provide the default process that will be concatenated to this without having a link?
That's a great question. No, but that's a great. I mean, that'd be a great feature to add. Where would you get the defaults from?
You can have a parent class that could have a configuration.
Yeah, well, you can pass, the classes could be passed in from the parent. There's definitely a mechanism to do that. So you could say, for all you know, the parent is attaching more classes outside of this. So that's a possible way.
Simple form does something similar.
Okay.
Redefine the default access.
Right. And the other thing, yeah, so that's a really good idea. And the nice thing about this is not a huge gem, right? It's got a very good, it's got a pretty good test suite. It's like got a 3.8, code, that code rating. Fairly easy to deal with. So, we're always looking for more developers. There's a core group of about 5 people that work on this, and we'd love to have anybody who wants to help. Features like that, and you'll see some of the features tonight I'll mention, were just people like you saying, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this and we added it. So, the idea here is to make you guys and gals have to write as little code as possible to get as much done. That's what's going on. Okay? So is it making sense? Making sense what's going on? This is replacing ERB. Okay? And it's just generating that stuff. Under the hood, that A is going to generate like an anchor tag string that's going to get shoved into the DOM, or not a string, but it's going to get shoved into the DOM. And then, so the syntax here is you've got your tag name, you've got the parameters to the attributes of the tag, and then you've got your block, and the block supplies the children that are inside the tag. So this could be, quite a deep thing going down here. And we'll see later that this could be your own components inside of here going down the big chain. Thanks. So in this case, what we're going to generate inside that anchor tag is we're going to take the param filter and camel case it, and away we go. All right. So that's what it looks like. And I'm going to remember to save it, because I've done this demo before and I forgot to save it. We sat here for about 5 minutes, wondering what the hell is wrong. So that's it. And that's our assignment for this chapter. So if I go back up here and I run chapter 2, keep our fingers crossed. These tests are all in the repo, so you can look at them. And if you have time, we could open one up. Just have a look at how the tests are written. But the testing, I just think is really powerful. I mean, I know we're not all into as testing as we should be. So there's our foo is in red. Do you see that? Because that was the selected one. And there's bar, it's not in red. So our 2 tests were basically, to test out the 2 cases of does it highlight it correctly. Yep. So you guys want to look at the test and just see how that works?
Yeah.
It might make sense. So here's our footer link spec. So describe footer link. Obviously, this is running down the browser, so JS is true. It uses the selected class if the current filter equals the filter. So there's some helpers that are added in here in the spec helper and component helper file. So this helper mount footer link will mount that link onto the UI, just in a blank UI. It'll pass it the parameters foo and the current filter of foo, just as if I built that thing and passed those 2 parameters in. And then inside of the block here is any additional code that you'd like to add to run in the browser to like update things. So in this case, just to make this style stand out, what we're going to do is take that selected class and make it bold F00, because otherwise it's very kind of dim with the little thing around it. So does that make sense? So then we mount the component, and then we find a anchor tag with the selected class, and it should have the content foo, right? And then we wait a couple seconds so we can see it on the screen. And then the inverse test is just the opposite way around. We're going to put the filter, the name of the filter is bar, and the current filter is foo. And then we're going to add our same thing in there. And this time, the anchor tag should have bar, and the page should not have any anchor tags with the class selected. Does that make sense to everybody? Because this will go faster. I mean, if we don't get this part, ask the main question you want now, because you've probably got 50% of React right already. Right? There's just a couple of other features we add on top of this, and away we go. So now's the time, and we can continue to play, but let's move on. So let's go to chapter, so that's our chapter 1 passes, and let's go into chapter 3. Okay, so chapter 3, what we're going to do is take that footer component, that footer link, and use it 3 times, giving it an all, completed, and active. And then we're also going to, over here, have the number of items that are active. In other words, they're not completed. And we're going to have those over here, and we're going to spell it properly. So just to save a few minutes, I'm not going to use the generator. I'm just going to paste in the component. Because that generator is just helpful because it gives you that skeleton to look at and read when you're learning. But at this point, we're just going to grab the component. To our component directory, new file. I'm going to name this footer. This is just the footer component, so Todo.rb. We paste that in there. And let's look at how this looks. So, just my notes here about what. Yeah, I don't think this doesn't really introduce any new concepts, except that we are going to use our footer link component. So effectively what's happened is we've added a new tag type into the mix, right? Because that class exists called footer link, we now can call that just like a built-in tag. And we're gonna pass down to this thing the current filter. So this is the current filter that the user selected. It's either all completed or active. We're gonna pass it down, and then we're also gonna pass down the incomplete count, right? These types are optional. This is just something that's built into React.js, and so they're available. You could leave them off, but they're nice. They're nice. It certainly makes the code more readable. If you don't match the type, you get a warning in the UI, in the console, in development mode. So they're not, it's not like a strongly typed thing. It's more just, I think mainly to me it's for documentation. It says, I know what to expect that thing to be. So we're going to render the footer tag with class footer. We're getting used to this now. And then its children inside of here basically has 2 children. It has that count, and it has the unsorted list of the three tags. Okay. So here we're going to switch gears a little bit. And here's this feature that this guy suggested. We were just on the chat one night, and he said, couldn't you do it like Haml? Who's used Haml? Who likes Haml, right? So we stole this from Haml. So you say span dot to do count, and then it turns that into the class. It attaches that as a class. Now, Ruby syntax, I can't say to do minus count. So any underscores are translated to dashes, because most people use dashes in their class names. If you really want a underscore, you can do underscore. But in general, that works out really nice. And like the main thing we use it for at CapPrint is we use Bootstrap. And so all the Bootstrap class names are like that. So we've got a span. We're going to give it a class of to-do count. And then we're going to basically build the string that's displayed there. So we're going to take the params incomplete count, the word item, and then we're going to attach an S onto it unless the param incomplete count is equal to 1. Okay? So unfortunately on the browser, we don't have, we only have a subset of action. Where do you get that pluralized method in Rails? What's it called? It's in one of the, it's one of the Rails gems. But the pluralization, it requires a fairly large file of words, and it's just too big to have sitting around in the browser. So you got to do that yourself. Otherwise, you can use a lot of the Rails gems and methods are included in here as long as they aren't too big. So we got our span, and we got our unsorted list, and inside the unsorted list are the 3 list items. Each list item is basically our footer link. We're passing the first one the all, the next one completed, the next one active, and they all get this current filter. Right? They all get the same current filter. So you're starting to see how this is working here. We're giving those, we're reusing that footer link 3 times. It's different because each time we're giving it a different name, but we're giving it the same current filter. And that's it. This is a key React and Flux. I mean, somebody asked on the web about Redux, right? What was that? Yeah. So this is all built into this, and it follows that model. The whole Flux model is your data comes in at the top, it goes down to the tree of all your nodes, and then at the bottom, at the leaf node, someplace you've got a user poking at things. And then that poking cycles back up, causes the top thing to change, and then it trickles back down. So this is very classic that we're passing this current filter down and down and down. All right, so there's our guy. So let's run a test. Let's look at the test first this time. Footers. Okay. So first we're going to mount the footer. We're going to give it an incomplete count of 9. We're going to set the current filter to all, and then we should have a.selected for all. We should have a without the selected for completed and active. We're just going to use Capybara save screenshot for fun, just to show that we've got all those tools that are built in to the Rails ecosystem for you. And then sleep a couple seconds. Then we're going to go through 0, 1, and 2. And basically lather, rinse, repeat. We're going to mount the footer. We're going to send our incomplete count down, and we're going to just make sure our pluralization works. Okay. Now, of course, this time we are running on the server, so now we can use Rails pluralize to check to make sure our pluralization works. And then finally, we're going to go through and make sure that the filter gets highlighted. So we're going to go through each of all completed and active and make sure when that is there, it's highlighted. Yeah. So let's see how we do. So we'll go to chapter 3.
Which Ruby are you running?
I have no idea. That might have been why I was so late, because I was rerunning through the demo, and I have to, full disclosure, the very last chapter didn't work. Luckily I have it saved elsewhere on my machine.
It looks like he's using Shoot.
Yeah.
No, wait, is he?
Well, it's not doing anything now, so we're just dying over here. Lucky me. So we can go to our debugger and see what's going on. Oh, you know what? I do this. I have to do this every demo. I forgot to save the file. All right. But that's good because it kind of shows, you see, we've got we bring up the browser, the debugger's here. You could put you could use, everybody ever heard of Pry Rescue? Great tool, right? You could just run this with Pry Rescue in the front and hit the failed case, it would stop, and then you could poke around in the browser and see what was wrong. But in this case, I hope that a simple file save will solve all of the problems. Now the other thing is that these tests, if you're familiar with Poltergeist versus Selenium, so Poltergeist it runs somewhat faster. So like on our, code ship release process, of course we're running all this in Poltergeist. But there you go, so we got one item left. And now it's going to go through and 2 items left. And I think the next test was to cycle through and make sure each one, so all is highlighted. And then complete is highlighted. And active is highlighted. Good. Okay, so we're on a roll. All right, so let's go on. Any questions on that one? There was really not much new in that, except for the only really new concept was that you know, these, as you build components, you're just basically adding new tags into the system. And you can reuse them, you can have, you know, whatever. And the other concept is, well, we got the, you know, this nice little syntax for that. And then just also re-emphasizing the point that you've got full access to Ruby. You're going to just write straight Ruby code to figure out what you want to generate. There's no tricks to it. It's not like ERB where you're always kind of confused about what can I do, what can I do. It's just straightforward Ruby. So let's go on to chapter 4. What was that? 4. Oh, like hundreds. 8. All right. So what we want to do here is, so there's this requirement that when I can type in a new to-do and hit carriage return, and that adds it to the list. There's also the requirement that if I double-click on this, it should go into edit mode, which the edit mode looks just like that. It lets me change the name of the thing, and then when I hit return, it changes the to-do. So we'd like to reuse, we'd like to have that be the same component in both places. So in order to do that, there's a couple of new concepts we're going to introduce here. One is, what you're going to see is that we have full access to our active record models on the client. And we kind of skipped over that in the first chapter. It talks about setting that up, and we'll cycle back and look at that now. But you'll have full access to your active record models. And then we're also going to use event handlers because we need to notice now, unlike these other components, we're going to start noticing when the user does things. So we're going to watch for blur, change, and something else, right? Click, probably click. Blur, change, and key down. We're going to watch the keystrokes because the requirement is that when you hit carriage return, then it finishes, right? So we need to watch the keystrokes as they come through. And then we're also going to make this component be an event emitter. So what we want to know is when did the user save that to do? We're going to need that later in some of our other components. We need to know when it got saved. We're also going to need to know when the user, if they exited by changing the focus, then they stopped editing. We need to stop edit mode. Right? Make sense? So we need to detect when the user either saved it or left focus. So we're going to emit those events back out again. So lather, rinse, repeat. Let's try and get a nice list of components here. This one is edit item. Look, I'll save it right away. So we're going to pass in our to-do model. And let's just stop right here and look at the models going on here. So there's nothing magic about, and this was just generated by running the normal Rails generator for a model. And there it is. So it's a simple model. We've got to do. It's got a completed scope and an active scope. Yeah. Easy. Now the only thing that's going on here is you'll notice the directory is in the public directory. So any models that you move out of the outer model directory into public will build proxies on the client that will act as APIs communicating back to the server. Right? So somebody's got to ask a question right now. I just moved my model to the server. I moved my model to the client, and so somebody's got to ask this next question. What are you worried about now? Security, yeah. So it uses what we use is a mechanism that we stole from Hobo. There's a package called Hobo, and what you do is you authorize attributes to be viewed by the current user, in the model. So you can augment your models with these attributes and tell who's got permission to see what. And that's all checked for you at the server side. So nothing gets down to the client unless the current active user has permission to see it. So that's the solution to that.
So the active user can't view the TD model in the browser?
The active user, well, let's say you added to this a user, right? I mean, this to-do model doesn't have a user. But let's say we added a user, so obviously you can only view your own to-dos, right? So then you would add a check in here, you add a little attribute check that says the current user can only view these items. If the current user only has permission if the current user equals the user of that model. Does that make sense?
Can you do that in the model?
Yeah, you do it in the model.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there is no controller anymore.
Okay.
The controller is gone, right? As you'll see, we're going to go through this whole app, and there's not any controller, so nobody's intercepting all that stuff.
You can still save things to active.
Yep. Yep, it does. So,
Should we expect an example implementation?
oh.
Security model?
We can pull some of the code from our CatPrint website at the end. We'll just show you how it does. Yeah, because obviously we are very concerned there. So yeah, we'll go through a couple of those. And so does that make sense? So what we've done is we just got our active record model, and where this came from is we had this problem. I mean, I've got a huge website. You know, it's an enormous website with huge databases of jobs and orders and states of jobs and users and customers and all this crap. And to build APIs for all that stuff would drive us out of our minds. So we wanted some way we just automatically have access to the models on the client. And that's what this does. So you just move them from out here in there. And of course, there's some models that doesn't make any sense to have down on the client. And those stay up. You just leave those in the outer directory and stay. Okay, so here's our edit item. Let's go back and look at that. So we've got our to-do. So we're just going to pass our to-do in. And then we've got this odd notation, this very odd notation, which will be, we'll deprecate this. But this was inherited by the original guy that authored the gem. And so if you want to make this, what we're going to do is by using this very odd notation of underscore on and then a camel case and make it type proc, that will then enable the calling component to attach an event handler to this guy. And you'll see how that works. And I do apologize that is one thing that needs to get cleaned up when we spend the time. So let's go down to the render method. So here's our input. So there's our input tag. It's got class edit. Its value is the current value of the to-do title. So the to-do model has a title, has a completed field, and timestamps and stuff. So it's got the current value of the to-do title. If there is no value, it displays what is left to do. On blur, so when we leave, we're going to do a params, and we're going to signal that event. We're going to raise the params on cancel event, and that will signal out to the caller the cancel operation happening. And then we're going to also add an on change event. So as the params to do title is going to get the target value as each letter as the user types. So we just keep typing the new value, we shove it into the model. It hasn't been saved yet, so we're still on the client. The model's getting updated on the client. And then finally, the user hits key code 13, so we're following the key down event, hits key code 13. We do a to-do.save, just like you would in Rails. You do a to-do.save, and then we signal the save event. Okay. Does that make sense? Is it too simple? Because it should be like too simple, right? That's the idea. Right? So, it's like Maz says, it should be pleasantly surprised all the time. So that's our guy, and then we'll run chapter 4.
So where are you defining the on cancel and the on?
Well, those are all built-in. Those are built-in HTML events.
Okay.
Right. So all of there's a huge list in the documentation. If you go to React.rb.org, in one of the chapters in there, it has like a list. So all the normal browser events are propagated through here. And they have, the naming rules are pretty consistent. It's just basically underscoreized, you know, and then into a symbol. Make sense? So you got blur, click, you know, whatever. Is that chapter 4 or 5? Cool.
Can you show how the routes are defined?
Oh, the routes?
Yeah, like, does it follow the same rails?
Well, yeah, let's talk about routing at the end. But so far, this app doesn't have any routes. So, and we can look at some example apps that have routes and stuff and talk about that.
Chapter 6 is about routes.
Yeah, no, we really don't. Yeah, this. See, it's happening again. The form. Now what? I saved it this time, right?
Yeah.
I did save it. I moved, that's in there. Edit. Edit. How did that? Does it look like I somehow accidentally moved? Spec. Oh. Why didn't I tell you today? Now I got it in the right place. So how many more mistakes did I make? Save the file and put it in the file in the right place.
Where does it go?
What? We're in the components directory. I put it in the spec directory because in the spec, you know, it's spec components, so it looks the same. And the names are almost the same. There it is. So this is to do left. We type, we change the name, and save it. Save it. 3. Okay. So let's look at the test spec, because it just looked like there's a lot of funny stuff happening there. But I think the test spec in this case is revealing. So. But it does not want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Factory Girl to create to do, all right? And then we're going to mount our edit item, pass it that to do. So it's on the server. So server, we got our to do, mount it, and then it can change the new title. So we're going to find the edit input. We're going to set it to new category title. We're going to send the return key. We're going to wait for all the AJAX to wind down. We've got to send it back up to the server. And then we're going to look on the server. We're going to reload the to-do, and the title should now be that. Make sense? So would anybody like to see that happening live? Like, let's do this. Let's do a binding.pry right there. And we're going to rerun just that one case. So we'll stop it, and then we'll look at the net traffic and see what is actually going on. bigger if it's, yeah, it'll just make that bigger, but it doesn't actually make the, no, it doesn't make that screen any bigger, so sorry about that. All right, so, but what you saw is there's a post to the save, there's an engine in here called the reactive record engine. So we posted a save to that, and in the data of the post was basically the set of models that have changed, a vector to find the model, and then any associations, anything else, and we want it to be validated, and then that will return basically, when it's done saving, it will come back with a response of success, tell you what models were saved, and any update attributes in the model. And again, the security mechanism, of course, would block that if you were attacked or if your code had a bug in it. The security mechanism would have blocked the save if you didn't have permission to save. Okay. So, how are we doing? Is it making sense to anybody? Does it like seem like it worked? All right, good. So let's go to chapter 5. All right. So we've got our little component editor. Now we're going to use it. We want to display a to-do item. So what does that consist of? It has a checkbox here that you can select or deselect it. We've got this. When you double click on it, it should go into edit mode, let you change it. And then when you hit return, it'll save it, and then you got your delete button. So we're going to reuse our component we just wrote there. This will be a checkbox, right? And at the end of each of these things, there's going to be a save, right? And we already saw the save in here, and then we're going to do a destroy. We're going to hit that. All right, I'm in the views. Good. That's going to be our to-do item. Just walk through how this looks. So we've got our parameter to do that we're passing in. So again, that flux model of these to-dos are coming down, down, down through the system. Now, the new concept we're introducing here is the concept of state. All right. So a state, a React state variable is exactly like a instance variable in this class, except with one difference. When it changes, it causes the React system to redraw whatever parts of the display were currently depending on that value. Make sense? So that is the magic of React right there. Is this idea that the components have a state, and when that state changes, then React is keeping track of where in the DOM is depending on that, it will re-render those portions, and it does a virtual DOM diff to sort of minimize the actual DOM influence. And that's all just coming out of, but by the way, this whole thing, I mean, there's nothing being added. At the very end, we'll talk about some stuff that are actually added semantically, that are like semantic additions to React. But so far, everything here is just, all we're doing is calling underlying React.js methods. So if you know React.js, you already know how to do all this stuff. If you're worried about, well, if I do this and I go have a job someplace else and they just want React.js, you've learned React, right? You'll just hate it because you'll have to deal with JSX and all this nonsense, right? But so hopefully you'll convince me you don't want to do it that way. So we got the state. Now the state is because if you think about how I describe the component, it has this mode, right? It can be editing or not editing. So somehow we have to keep track of what state the user is in at this point in time. So that leads us right there to a state variable. Now you don't want to create a lot of these things. You want to really think about, is it a state or is it just data coming in from the top? There's no way that the guy outside of here could have known whether the user's editing. So it's nice, it's contained in here. So we define our state editing, it starts off as false. And then down here, right, I've got my, we'll start down here. We've got our input box. That's our toggle. Down here, we're displaying the label with the to-dos title, right? Then on double click, we're going to set that state editing to true. So we don't use assignment for, there's partly a historical reason, partly there's some other subtle reasons why we want to be very explicit. When you do this, there's going to be side effects all over the place, right? That's the whole point, the bang method, and it's like, so you know, when I'm doing this, I'm updating the value of editing to true, and it's going, the side effect is going to be anything currently in the DOM that is depending on that value, its current value will have to be redrawn. So how does that happen? It comes up here. It's going to, React going to figure out that this component right there on that line depended on it. It's going to remember that, it's going to know it. So it's going to say, okay, I got to re-render this guy and see what happens now. So now it comes through and says, oh, now it's true. So stated that that's true. So I'm going to display my edit item component. I'm going to pass my to-do down to him. I should just, we deprecated being able to just say that without the params in front. You used to be able to say it, you can still say it this deprecated. So just the correct style here. We just found it makes it clearer that way you know what this thing really is. So I'm passing parentheses down, and then on save, right? So remember, this edit item had those callbacks, those emitters, right? So we're just like we can invent new components, new tags, we can also invent new events. So we invented the save event and the cancel event. And in this case, we don't care which one it is. In either case, we set the state of editing back to false. DOM will re-render, come back through, it says, oh, you're false, I'm going to do this thing now. Make sense? So that's it. You're just about done with React. I mean, there's not much else in the whole thing. Our input, we just have we have a class toggle type checkbox. It's checked if param to do is completed. Otherwise, it's unchecked. When you click it, we're going to take param to do completed and set it to its inverse, and then do a param to do dot save. Yeah. So it's just this basically this to-do object is just a Rail, an active record model, or a proxy. It's basically a proxy of the model sitting on the client with enough data so that it can efficiently render and update stuff. We've got our label, we talked about that, and then finally on the end we've got our anchor tag, destroy, and we click destroy. Yeah. So. Any questions? Yeah.
State.
Yeah.
Can it be used outside of the component?
We'll get to that, yes. You can. And the last component we'll do is, it's about the last concept we have to cover here. But yes, that's, and we'll see how it's very necessary. It's a very good question. Here we go.
Other question?
We're going to display our thing. Check it, right? Check. So that test is just like the one we saw before. We create the model up on the server using factory drill. We change the state. We just read the model when it's done. Make sure it's okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. For an entire page, would you create a page component or have a layout file? Can you use ERB?
Yeah, you can. You can, and like we do in CatPrint because. Yes, you can, and you can have multiple of these top-level components. So I think that's especially true if you're coming from an existing app, where you've already got some structure to it, and then you think about your top-level page. I've got my nav bar. That's a separate thing from this and that. Yeah, so there's no reason to have them all be one. This will one page will just be one big component. Okay, so 4 examples and failures. Are we all set? Good. Flying along. Chapter 6. We're really done. Yeah, we're just about done. All right. So, chapter 6. Let's just paste the component in, and we'll talk about it. So this is our top-level component, and in Rails, if you had a page that was displaying all to-dos, what would that page be called? What would be the controller called? Index, yeah. So we'll, just in following, keeping with the Rails tradition, there's really no reason to do that. It makes generators and stuff a little bit easier, but we're going to follow that tradition. We're going to call this tuple component index. So that's what it's kind of doing. More traditionally in React, you might call it app, right? That's the index.rb. All right. So we're calling it index because it's our tuple component. We're going to define our state new to do. Now what this is doing for us, what we're going to keep in there is we're always going to keep a new unsaved to do, and that's what the user can edit at any time. When they save it, then we'll save that to disk and we'll generate another. There's always this new blank to do floating around in the UI. And then here's the answer to your question, right? You got export state filter. Because so down at the very bottom of this, and we're going to have to go back and edit that footer component because the user clicks on the all link, right? That means that we have to get this back up here, right, and change the filter, and then cascade that all the way back through again. And that is the redux or flux cycle. And we're probably going to change. We're going to deprecate that term because it's very confusing terminology. This is basically like a redux store.
What are you going to call it?
Well, probably the current syntax, and there's issues up on the web, you can look at them, and your thoughts and comments would be great. What we're thinking about heading to is this will be defined state, filter, and then there'll be a scope. And the scope of this is global, right? Something like that, because what you're doing here is you're creating this, it works just like the new to-do state variable, except there's only one of these, so it's like a class instance variable, right? There's only one. If you think about it, you wouldn't have more than one of these in the system, right? So this is this top level thing. So there's one of them, and the export state does two things. It creates this class level variable, and it also makes it publicly accessible. And we'd really rather not do that. I mean, the right way to do this would be to have this be like a private thing, and then have a method on here called setFilter, right? That would be much cleaner to look at. And I could have done it that way. There's no reason why you can't do it that way, but this thing does expose that to the outside world, which we just at this point think is wrong. The other thing that's new in this component is this before mount. So there's about 7 lifecycle callbacks, very much like your active record lifecycle callbacks. And the before mount is probably one of the most commonly used one. It's just like your initializer. So in this case, we have some more complex initialization to do. And it happens after the parameters are first sent to the component, but before it's drawn on the DOM. So I've got my parameters, which we don't have any in this case. We're going to set our new to-do to just a new to-do. And we're going to set our index filter to all. Okay? So we could get this like maybe out of a cookie or something like that would be nicer, so it remembers each time you open your browser. In this case, we're just setting it to all and going on. And then down here, this is all pretty much what we've seen already. We've got our header in there. We've got an H1 tag with the word to-dos. We use our edit item. We pass it that new to-do that we had. And this is why we care about, say, in this case we don't care about cancel, but when the user saves that, it's already been saved, but we know now I need to initialize new to-do to another to-do. So that's going to trigger a re-render of this chunk of the component, right? It's basically going to trigger a re-render just him. Because he now has a new to-do, which is blank, and it's going to erase it and go back to blank. So this is magic. I mean, there's no code here doing any of this stuff. This is very logical. On save, set that to a new to-do. There you go. And then we have our unsorted list of the to-do items, the class to-do list. We're going to take that filter. So this is why, in a real app, you would have some methods protecting this stuff and looking at the actual code. But in this case, we're just going to cheat and say, take index filter, send it to the to-do model, and hopefully we haven't got any typos, and it'll match the one of the scopes that we have all completed or active. But I think you can all see how you would actually, in a real thing, you would actually have, you might even make this into a separate class. You have a class component that really doesn't have, it has a blank render method that's really never used. It just encapsulates the state and does some things with it. You know, so that's something we do at Cat, with some of these more complex things. So we get our scope, and then we take each one, and we just call our to-do item, list it out. We got our footer, current filter. Current filter is index.filter. Okay? And incomplete count is our to-do active count. Yeah? Makes sense? So at this point, you might say, well, I actually didn't need to pass this. I could have read that I could have directly read that down in the footer component, right? So again, it's just, this is the experience of people who have been using React for a lot longer than any of us. It's just debug, everything gets easier if you imagine this flow down, down to the bottom, somebody changes it, flow down like that. And it just, the world is easier, you end up with these stateless components, you can see what's going on. Instead of, otherwise you end up with spaghetti code and things are like, triggering changes in your state from all over the place. It just makes life hard, okay? So there's our basically our finished product, right? And what I'd like to do, just in the interest of time, there's 8. So, right, so we've been at it an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over to I think I mentioned that. And instead of running the test, I'm just going to run the I'm going to run a couple of our apps here. Okay. So everybody's completed. There's no active to-dos. If I check this, right, it's removed from the list, right? So on and so forth. They're all completed now. Make sense? It's good. I don't know what's going on there with this here. So the other part of the story is what happens if I have this in another window. So there's one window. So there's both my windows up, right? And so, right over here, I'm looking at just the completed. So as I'm checking in completed, it's updating where it is. What's that puzzle for? So there's another little piece of magic that just kind of skipping to the end. There's another gem that's added in the final section called synchro mesh, right? And what that's doing is it's using WebSockets to keep all of these guys up to date, right? So it's using the same mechanism, it's just got this extra WebSocket thing that attaches in there. And
Is it that obvious?
what?
Is it that obvious?
Well, no, I would expect somebody to look puzzled. I'd be delighted. I'd like somebody saying, "Oh God." So let's try some. Let's just for the heck of it, let's try this. See if I can get this to work. Someone is forward. So somebody want to try that URL catprint.fwd.wf should be pointing to my computer. Well,
What was that socket thing? Was it?
It's synchro mesh. It's like brand new, there's no documentation. I wrote it for you guys. Somebody's in, I can see it, right?
What do I have to actually go to?
Oh, slash to-dos. So catprint.fwd.wf to-dos. Somebody changing something here? Hello world, I see that, right? Walk the dog. What kind of dog?
Oh my God. I can't load it.
What?
It was slow.
Yeah.
So how do we connect?
We're in development mode, so there's a huge amount. All the source code is coming down, as well. So you got all your source, because you go in the debugger and it's got such a break. What was the question?
Yeah, how do we connect that to the web page? Because so far.
How did that get connected? It's just that the code looks like this. I don't need another terminal.
Wait, is this you?
So it's just a gem. To connect it up, there's a gem called Synchromesh, right?
Sorry,
Why don't you
actually portion,
What?
I just mean React application.
I think he means the routing in the controller. Maybe he means the routing in the controller.
Well, okay, that's a good question. Come back to that. Let's finish this.
I'm missing a little piece. I built all these components. I have an active application.
You're right. We did skip. There was a couple of steps in that chapter. I'm sorry, Mike. Just kind of concerned about the time when they fall asleep. Yeah. So we've got a controller. Okay. So let's start at the route. We've got a route here called. So we got a route called to do, right? And then we've got a controller called to do's controller. And then it calls, there's a helper that's added in by reactive Ruby that called render component. You can pass parameters in here and do anything. By default, it uses the name of the controller method and it assumes that the component name will be the same. And then it's got like a search path mechanism, so it'll find, so even if that component's down a tree, it'll find it. Does that answer your question?
And it will render into the application template.
Yeah, it renders that in, so the application template in this case looks like is, so there's just a yield there. So it's just like normally, if you render the view.
Nothing extra. Basically.
What?
Nothing extra.
Nothing extra. Now, to answer your question, like what if you had somebody was asking.
It's doing it.
Yeah, I got it.
In a real, especially if you're evolving from an existing app, it may not be just so easy just to shove one component at the top level. And in that case, you can use that same method, render component, in here, and so you can have several components being rendered. So the controller version, they have the same syntax. Make sense? So, as promised, okay, so action cable, right? I think you asked.
Action tables in Rails 5.
Right, so Rails 5, and the plan would be just to add, so in that Synchromesh gem, there's a config file, and it has, it uses pusher, or it can use a polling mechanism, and at some point we'll just add, or maybe you would be so kind as to get that added in
I
there.
have too much on my plate.
It's really pretty simple. There's really just a couple, it's like, probably 100 lines of code or less. You have to, there's a piece of code that goes down on the browser, and then there's a little piece of code on the server to deal with the channels. So it won't be hard to add. And so our first priority was just to get something going with this. So this literally, I can't, so we figured this out on Monday. We've been worried for some time about permissions, how that was going to work. You're going to broadcast this out to the world. And so we were kind of concerned about how permissions is going to work. So we cracked that code and cooked this up. So it's pretty, the synchro mesh is brand new. You're the first people that ever hear it, except for some of my team. So, yeah.
What's the performance like compared to ERB?
Well, so ERB, right, is static, so you're just rendering a static thing.
Right.
So your performance.
Say jQuery.
Well, let's go down the tree. I mean, your fastest performance is probably like ERB, and frankly, TurboLinks is very fast. I mean, for myself, the performance is not an issue. We have a big app. Performance is not an issue. Computers just get faster. And last time I checked, there's a worldwide developer shortage, not a worldwide compute power shortage. So, I mean, in 18 months, right, they're all going to be twice as fast anyway. So to me, obviously, I mean, it's got to serve my customers. I have real customers that are placing orders, hundreds of orders a day, and it's got to work well for them. But it doesn't have to work. You can go so far with performance, and the main thing is to get it to work. Does that make sense?
I saw in your test you did a lot of mounting, but in React you can also do like shallow. Is there any
In the test, I did a lot of.
mounting?
Yeah.
But in React you can also do like shallow rendering.
Yeah. The way we've been doing our testing is basically starting at the leaf nodes, mounting those, testing them, mounting the next one, testing, and going up the tree like that. So when we're testing a top-level component, we're also testing all the tree down. We haven't. I mean, you could easily add some helpers in there to do the shallow rendering. So I don't know if anybody. So React.js for testing has this concept of shallow rendering, where what you do is you say, I'm going to automatically stub these components. So when I test, if we go back to our, if I can find it. If we go back to one of our components like index, right? So shallow rendering would say, when I do test that index component, I just want to test the logic that's right there, and I want to automatically just stub footer and to do item and all that stuff, and then I have test helpers that would then count. Did you generate so many to-do items that have this? And it's a good idea. Please. I think there's a gem in your future. So not hard to write. I mean, so far there's no gem or anything with the testing. It's just a bunch of spec helper crap that's tossed in there. It's a mess, but it works, and it's kind of tuned up to work. It should be turned into a nice gem in the package. Next.
I have a question about also like how you're doing like the UL.to-do list. In
Yeah.
YAML, if you leave the UL out, by default it's a div. Do you do that as well?
No. It's an interesting idea. Because I guess what would happen is you would have to have that to-do list be raised a no method error. And then it would say, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll tag a div on the front and go on. We could try that. Yeah, he's shaking his head. I think it's, I think typing div dot is not worth the, because I mean, what would happen then is it would then interpret, now is it if you type dot? I can't remember if you type.
Right, like dot means it's a class.
Yeah, and of course that syntax is going to work in Ruby. So maybe you could have a, for some reason you could have a method called d, say d dot, it'd be a little bit shorter. So typing in a hurry. No, it's a good question. I mean, you do have to, we are living within the syntax. There's pluses and minuses. We're living within the syntax of Ruby. The big plus is you don't have to learn another syntax. The other big plus is that everything Ruby has to offer, all the features of Ruby are available to you. You don't have to write any more to make it work. The negative is, sometimes the syntax is not perfect. It definitely is not, as beautiful as if you invented a language, it's like if you wanted to augment Ruby and have like a real live Ruby plus, something that had a few extra features on it. But then, I don't know. That's where we're at. So, who would use this? Yeah. There's
What do you think it's best used for?
just, honestly, we have a little page, if I can find it now. We have just a little page that just monitors, it monitors all of our work. We have like a scalable worker farm that as more and more images need to be processed, we can scale workers. It's just a very simple little UI. It's just easy to write in React. It's just, you're gonna have to write all that code anyway, right? You're gonna have to write all that code, no matter what you do, you're gonna write it, either gonna write it in HTML, or you're gonna write it in a HAML, or you're gonna write it in, what?
Slim.
Yep. So you're going to write it in something. So to me, I would say, if I ever make another UI, I'm just going to write it in, even if the whole thing is a big static rendering, I'm going to write it, because, so the other piece of this that we haven't talked about is, this is React, so you do have server-side rendering. So these components are being rendered when you first hit that to-do page, it renders that on the server and then delivers the final rendered product to the client. Then once it hits the client, it does a checksum and says, okay, that's the same that I would render down here, and lets the user have at it. So you get the full speed of the initial rendering. So you can use it use it as ERB. If you've got a static component, it'll never re-render, never do anything. So for me, I don't want to ever write another angle bracket in my life, if I can help it. I lived all the way through that. You guys don't know, but at one time, people thought we're going to do everything in XML, right?
Wait, how?
You didn't have to live through that horror story, right? Now at least we have JSON. It looks pretty decent, right? Can you imagine writing every single time you need to pass data around it? What a mess. What do you think, Ryan? The only guy I know here.
Yeah, well, I'm also.
Huh?
I don't really have any background in Ruby, so.
No, it's fine. But
Are there any other businesses besides your own that
No.
are using it?
no, there's a bunch of people that are starting up. There's probably, I have no idea, but as far as I know, we're the first. This really just got. We're still in alpha test. So I'll show you the website. And you can, it's open. The thing works. You can go up there and place an order. My customer service team is using it. But the big problem we're having, not a problem, but we have to make a transition between this site and the one the customers have now. And it's always tough. It doesn't matter how much better it is, people want to see what they're used to seeing. So we're trying to work through.
Did you try implementing raw React.js with your Ruby app before doing this, or?
No. So my journey on this started with Ember. So we did a couple of the internal apps that we use in Ember, and liked it. But I don't know. Has anybody used Ember?
Community, the one thing that I love about Ember is it's got an incredible community
Yeah.
behind it.
It does, yeah.
Like you can, they have a Ember add-ons, you can just go to there and search
Yeah.
for all the add-ons, similar to Ruby Gems. Ruby has the same type community behind it. React, Angular, you don't see that.
Right.
That's one of the things that's kind of like,
So-
fuck this community.
Yeah, so the one difference I would say is, I think it's absolutely true. Pat is a great guy, and a very good friend of mine is Peter Wagon, is on the core team on Ember. So, I had like an inside track. I could call Peter out and get help and everything. But a big difference is, so Ember is a framework, right? It's like a whole structure like Rails for your UI, right? React is not, people are always like, React's a framework. It is not a framework, it's just a library. Honestly, you've seen almost everything you need to build a very complete app today. So that's not a framework, it's just a library. You wouldn't call, I mean, I don't know, you wouldn't call, you wouldn't call Haml a framework, right? It's just a mechanism to write UI code, right? So exactly. So it's not a framework, and in response to what you're saying, because it's not a framework, you don't need as big a community. I mean, there's just not as many questions. I mean, it's just kind of simple. And hopefully the community will grow, you know.
I think that's one of the things that's great about Ember is that you've got all these bits and pieces, and you've got a community there kind of making sure that it's all curated.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, it's puts and takes. And I would just say that the yeah. So this is the most complicated part. It's like a big on-page app for ordering your job.
What is this written in? React.rb?
Yep. It's about 20. I think less than about 25,000 lines.
How much?
About 25,000 lines. Good, bad, I mean.
But you put it in components, so each of your files stays fairly small, or are they pretty large? Okay.
No, they should be. So we got to, I mean, we learned how to do this, right? So I mean, these poor guys that work for me, right? We're going to do all this stuff in React, and I got to go write this, you know, and they're like learning how to do it. So we do have to go back. The components should be what you saw today. And it's just a matter of, you can do it that way. The other thing we didn't touch on is, there is no reason to, like in here, I could extract this, right? And I could just say header. Make sense? So I mean, and again, it's just the power of that you're in Ruby, so you can just do it. And then, of course, because these are classes, and this is probably where we're heading, is you know, we're actually going to split the classes across multiple files. So we'll have multiple, open the class several times, and add different methods in the class, and then the render method is just a very high level calling these things. Because you don't need a whole component for that header. It's not going to get used anywhere, but it is nice to structure the code that way. So you would have like header. You would have to-do list, right? So we have to do some structuring. Yeah, it's a big code package, but you got to remember. So we drive the entire, you know, so the whole business is driven off of this website. You know, orders are coming in. There's screens that display all of the, you know, all the current orders, prioritize what has to be printed today, what, you know, blah 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 blah. So there's, I don't know how many actual pages there are, but it's like maybe 20 pages.
Is this using Synchromesh or no?
No. So Synchromesh, I'm not kidding. So Friday we had this big discussion about how are we, because we need Synchromesh for, like for example, if I log in, what's that?
Is it yours?
This is for me as a customer. This is what my customer, if a customer logs in, this is what they see, right? And what we'd like to do is, as these jobs change state, we would like them to automatically be updating as we change the state. So customers aren't calling customer service, oh, I don't understand my job. And then you multiply that internally. We have big displays that are displaying the state of jobs as they move through the system, and those need to be dynamically updated for obvious reasons. We need to know. And right now, what people do is they just have the refresh button every minute, refresh the page, which puts a tremendous load on the server. So it's just recalculating all this stuff every time. So we really felt like the next thing we really have to do for production, all the rest of the stuff is pretty good, is figure out how to synchronize across all the clients. So we've been discussing it for months, and the big sticking point was how do you, the problem is if you update, some client updates the state of a job. Says, okay, this job is now moved from printing to finishing, right? All of the admin, anybody in the class admin use was logged in can see that information. And the customer whose that job is should be able to see that information, right? But nobody else, right? So how do you've got to push this thing up. It changes in the database, and now you're going to broadcast it to who? So what Synchromesh does is it basically goes through and says it checks. It takes the model that's being updated and says, okay, who has permission to see that model? And then the breakthrough was to say, oh, well, it's cheap to have channels in WebSockets. So each user has a channel. And all we do is we say, okay, does that channel have permission to see that data? And then that way it gets broadcast over the channels of information. So,
does that work for non-React.rb stuff too? Synchromesh?
No. I mean, you could adapt it, but it's heavily relying on the fact that. So what's happening is like if you look at that screen where you have this list of to-dos, right? And you click the completed item. Right? It's relying on all that other mechanism under the hood to say, right, I'm updating this proxy of record, that's causing React to re-render, blah, blah, blah.
So Synchromesh will actually take the updates to the model, like the active record update, and then pipe that straight into the React state to trigger a whole event.
Right. I mean, yes. I mean, it's straight in the sense that the data comes down, and it looks like an update to this model, right, on the client, and then the model goes through. The hard part is updating the model is easy, right? So it's just the same as if I click, type in something and change it. But updating the scopes is a little bit harder. So it's got to recalculate how the scopes change as this data changes. So I mean, the bigger question I think that you're asking is, how does React Record do this? If you're looking at what's really going on, you look at this footer to-do item component, right? So at any point in time, we're displaying a list of to-do items, right? So anybody in the system that has a hold of that this to-do, right, doesn't have to be in that parameter. That to-do is just an object in the system. So anybody that's got a hold of that object to-do, it sets it to completed. You know what we can do? It's easy. So we go in here. So here's our guy. And if I go. Here and I say to-do, there's my to-do model. Global.to-do dot all Here's all my to-dos. So if I take the 0 with 1, now I got a hold of that, one of those to-dos on that list. And look at that, push 0, and say, so, all right, so it's the first one. Can you see what I'm typing here? I'm basically translating this from Ruby into JavaScript in my head. But there's a guy that's got a very nice, I just don't have it loaded, that runs this thing as a Ruby console. So you can type Ruby. He's got some bugs, so I didn't want to get into having that on here and blowing up stuff. So we got a hold of the first to do. So I did Opal to do. I scoped it all. I got the actual underlying collection. There's our pusher, right? Sending, checking stuff, going back and forth. And then I got the title sup. So now if I change that, if I do $title equals. No, you can't. I couldn't find a way to zoom in on that.
I think if you right-click the inspector, you can open an inspector for the inspector, and then you could.
And then it will do it.
Well, then you could add a CSS rule to the root of Zoom, the Zoom property, 200% or whatever.
you gotta come in here and help me do that. I can't.
That makes sense.
So sorry about the size. Right, so I changed that. I just went in the browser and changed it to Ralph, and there's change Ralph on the screen. Right. So you saw like the state variables, right? What's happening is there are like state variables attached to all your records, and then they're interacting with React. So as things change in the record, it's telling React to update. And all the single mesh is doing is just bringing down this data.
I missed what you said about Ember. Did you say why you decided against it?
Way too complicated. I could not teach. I barely understood it. It would require us rethinking a lot of stuff. Whereas this again was like a whole other framework to learn. And this is just like I already know everything I wanted. I mean, I just had to unlearn some stuff. I just don't have to do as much. So I think that. The magic is, the Facebook, the React.js is pretty a magical concept. Just saying, look, forget all this stuff. Forget about having to manually worry about how to update things. Just let the software take care of it. We'll take care of it. We'll figure it out. We'll do it. And the key is that React.js. The React cycle, the event, the states in the React and all that, that's what makes it work.
Any server data storage examples?
Server data.
Database. Where are you actually saving it to do this?
That's all saved on the
Going
server.
to database.
Yeah.
But do you have it in an example list, or just you're assuming that there is? I looked through the source code.
Yeah. Your again, maybe I'm not understanding the question. There's my model.
Well, I see that you haven't done. I only had 4 chapters.
It's in the first chapter. Yeah, that's in the very first. That's a setup in the first chapter.
Okay, I'll go.
This is React implemented entirely in Ruby?
No, the underlying engine is React.js. So we're not. So it's just like a wrapper that generates. Instead of if in React you write in JSX, or you can just write straight JavaScript code. This is just generating the DSL. It's just a big DSL. And the DSL is just generating calls into React. So. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't even mention it, but of course, big mention. I mean, the whole thing is built on top of Opal, which is the Ruby to JavaScript transpiler. Right, that's what makes this all possible, right? Is that the Opal, so Opal, everybody heard of Opal? No, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, it should be. I mean, there's no reason why you can't translate Ruby into JavaScript. So that's, yeah.
Have you tried translating JSX to React Ruby?
Yeah, I mean, JSX doesn't look that different. I mean, you could, I mean, I have done it. No, I mean, I have done it because the tutorials on, you go to React.rb.org. Thanks for all those great questions. You were great.
Rejected. Hey.
Yeah, so if you go to this, if you go here, these were all the code on this. This is all I did was I took the React.js Facebook page and I sent them an email. I said, I'm going to just steal this whole thing. It's open source, right? And I just stole it and I just retranslate all the JSX. So I mean, it doesn't look. Yeah, we could do like side by side. Facebook. Right, so there's their, this is JSX. Yeah, there's some JSX.
You need to zoom in.
Yeah, I will zoom in on this. I know how to do that.
Right down to the page. I see the top component of the page is similar.
What's that?
The nav bar.
Oh yeah, no, I just took the thing, I did a git clone, and I started typing as little as possible. You get to be my age, you get very lazy. Let me tell you. There's only, I don't know, I feel.
It's a sign of a good engineer.
Okay, so yeah, so there they are side by side, right? So this is yeah, so there's JSX, hello message equals React create class, render, and then you've got this JSX kind of mixed in there. So, and then here we just got our class, hello world. Yeah, so you don't have to, in React, you don't have to declare the params. We basically make you declare the params because it just cleans up a lot of code and know what's going, what we're expecting.
I think in the newer React they do require it. It's like on the bottom top tips.
Well, I think it's optional, but a lot of people do it anyway because it adds runtime type checking.
Right. I mean, it just for us. I mean, the way we'd have to discover these things would be through method missing calls. And this way, we actually can create objects that have the params in it, and it makes things a lot more efficient. So, but there you go. Yeah. And of course, the page is all. This is all written in React, right? So I can go in here and say over there. Right, so it updates over here.
Is there any downside to using Opal versus React.js?
I mean, it's going to be bigger. You're gonna have a bigger payload. That's for sure. I'd say that's the biggest downside. It's going to be you're gonna have a bigger payload. You are going to, the runtime performance is not going to be. If you're to go measure 1,000 re-renders, right? It's going to be slower. But the problem is that a user can't see the difference between,
It's transpiled on a client?
No, it can be. I mean, it's a complete Ruby within a compiler. So the compiler by default is not downloaded. But that's what these are. This is obviously using the transpiler is running on the browser. And that's how I'm able to type thing updates. So, and there's a gem called inline reactive Ruby. You're asking Melissa about like what situation would they use it? Well, I mean, it's not a gem. It's just include a JS file called inline reactive Ruby. You can include it in your thing. You got a static page, and it downloads and it transpile your script tags, you can script tag things as type Ruby and it'll transpile them into code online. Yeah. So did I answer? You had questions about React. We had questions about Redux, right? So I think hopefully the active record model is essentially the Redux store in this kind of system. You've got the store, the data is changing in that, it's broadcasting out, and things are updated. And if you need to make custom things, you can do just what was done there. So that's that question. And then the other question was, getting started, I think you see that you could really take an existing Rails app and you run that generator, it'll install the extra directories and setups, and you could do a couple of components. I mean, that's what we did. We started our website, we just started with, to try it out, we took like this nav bar and we did it as just a single component. And it's still that way in our top level layout file. They're really, if we were to redo this, it would be one big component. But from an evolutionary standpoint, it's a lot easier to just write a bunch of images. So that's that question. There's and I will post, I'll send you the links to all this. I'll get that last chapter cleaned up, figure out what some gem changed. So some of the things are I'll get that posted.
Somebody also asked how to try contributing to.
Yeah, contributing. So absolutely, we take pull requests all the time from anybody. There's a number of issues. There's issues tagged as like good for beginners. So we tag issues like that. There's like little changes that need to be made. There's always documentation. There's no documentation for reactive record. It doesn't need a lot because it basically, it just needs some here's the differences. There's subtle differences. For example, we didn't really get into the demo, but everything in JavaScript, right, is asynchronous. So when you do a save, your code continues to execute. So if you want to know did the save succeed and what happened, you have to put a block after it. You say save dot and then do, and then you have a block that will get called when the save actually completes. So there's small differences like that are just by the nature of JavaScript versus what you can do up on a server. So documentation, this site, this React site here, it could use a lot of help. Just pull requests on the site, blog posts, people have done little projects. There's all these things here that all need to get translated. I think if you go there now, they go to page not found. No, see, they just go to the Facebook page. So that would be a great way to learn some of this stuff, would just be translated through these pages over and actually work. She left, but honestly, it would be great to have somebody take all that crud in the spec helper in this demo, and there's a component helper and a spec helper, and clean that up a bit and put that into a gem. It would be like a testing gem. I really would like that. I guess the other thing I did promise to show. I mean, we could. It's like, for me, it's like having a baby. So I'll just be here all night, blah blah. Right? So, people are leaving. I'll eventually it'll just be me talking to myself. So don't feel like you go if you want to go.
You should have another meetup to follow up on this.
Yeah, I mean, I have family here in the city.
Oh, you don't live here?
No, I live.
Where do you live?
Rochester, New York.
Rochester?
Yeah.
Wait. Upstate Rochester?
Yeah.
He came all the way from Rochester.
Yay!
Yeah, but it was.
That's far.
What?
I said that's far.
No, it's like a nice train ride. It's like a $60 train ride. Train. You sit on the train. You got good Wi-Fi. You work on the train. But I have family here. My son and his wife live here, and so it's just a great excuse to come down. I have friends over in New Jersey, so.
Plus you get to present this to us?
That is what it's all about. I mean, having a business was a lot like having a baby. It's just like my pride and joy. Have you guys seen the guy with the hoverboard? Who has seen the hoverboard?
I've seen a video of it.
Yeah, like that, you know, goes 93 miles an hour, goes up 10,000 feet, right? Yeah. So this guy in France, he's been working on it for years, and he looks like the thing is so small that people, when the first video came out, people were saying it's a fake, it's Photoshop, and they asked him, well, what did you think about that? He goes, that's what I wanted. I wanted it to look like it was fake. I wanted it to look like it was impossible. It's like literally like this big around, am I right? About that big around.
Is it jetpack or?
It's got 4 250 horsepower jet engines in the base of this thing, and then some stabilizer thrusters, and then he carries a camelback on his back with 10 minutes of jet fuel. Feed down his leg into this thing.
That sounds really safe.
I came here on Uber. I mean, I felt all right about it.
How did you come to this project?
Well, I mean, so I had this problem that you know, my business is not, I mean, I love software. That's my passion. That's what I don't consider any of this work. This is not work. It's just fun. But I have a business. My business is like printing crap, right? And I don't know anything about printing. It's just that's the business I fell into. I'm going to start a business. It's the business I got. So, you know, what we do is we print stuff. And you know, we make money by people give us things to print. We print them, and we pack them, and we ship them, right? That's how I make money. That's how I live. That's how I eat. I feed 20 people doing this, right? I don't do software. I mean, none of my customers are saying, you know what, we're going to pay you to make software. So the cheaper, for me, the cheaper I can do software, the better. So, I cannot afford, you know, when we bootstrapped, we had to pay, you know, people the going rate, you know, for software development. Some really good developers around the world that have done the heavy lifting. But at some point, I say, you know, I got to make money. I got to make this cheaper. I got to get the software done for nothing because it's not my business. So we have an apprenticeship program. We sign down in the cafeteria. Anybody that wants to learn to code can go take some code school courses on their own time. When they're done, they can come and they say, I'd like to do this. You know, so we've had people that have done it. They couldn't complete the course. We have people that did it and said, I did it, but I can't do that all day. And we've had people say, man, this is great. And then they come, we interview them, we say, okay, you're an apprentice. You work up here 20 hours a week and you train and you keep doing your old job for 20 hours. And it's like high school grad getting $9 an hour, right? And then once they get through the initial apprenticeship, they get a 5% bump, and then they get steady bumps up. So we've grown on our own. We're on a third development now, and it's like it's great kosher. What do you mean it's not kosher? Because, I mean, these people were doing, I mean, this one guy's got a high school education. He's sitting on a production floor, taking stacks of paper, going, picking them up, putting them over here. This is what he's doing for his job, right? For $9 an hour. So he's got an opportunity, right? And he didn't have to pay RIT, I don't know, our local schools. You know, I think, you know, get a comp sci degree is probably 160 grand, you know, these days.
There aren't enough software apprenticeships.
No, I just think I would do this. I'm working with a guy who's the president of Boys and Girls Club in Rochester. I said, I'll take, you know, not everybody wants to be a software engineer. Not everybody has the aptitude, right? But there are people that enjoy it. And why shouldn't they be doing it?
I mean, like, I don't mind working for free, but I have to be able to get something out of that. Like, if this person is somebody that I know that really knows their shit, I'll do it.
Well, yeah. Anyway, but the answer to your question is, so I can't afford, I gotta do this faster. I gotta do it for cheaper. And I can't, and we just had to figure out a way to make it so we can write software for less and get more done. And that's, you know, because that's not, And I think that's the true of everybody. Nobody wants
Where can I
software,
find the video?
right? I want an Uber cab, right? I want to get here like earlier. Not have this guy going around in circles and I'm watching my phone, but I want an Uber cab. Right? I need software to get the Uber cab, but I didn't buy software. I bought a ride.
Well, thank you, Mitch, so much
Yeah,
for coming.
very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if there's a follow-up, you know, like things with us, you know.
Oh, sure. You, anytime. So who is somebody's got to take me